Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Angie and this is Cover Spines and Pages. Tonight we're going to have a Thirsty Thursday conversation, which is going to be a new series on my channel we'll try it for a few weeks and see how it goes. But the premise is basically to have a conversation about a book that I've finished recently and have a beverage with my friends. So it'll be like sitting around having beers, talking about books, stuff like that. So tonight's beverage of choice is Angry Orchard hard cider. Not all that exciting, not that fancy, just happens to be what I have in the fridge. I thought it would be kind of cool to pick a drink that went with the book that I'm going to talk about, but tonight I'm going to be talking about a book that really the only appropriate beverage I could think to go with it was straight whiskey. And I'm not going to have straight whiskey tonight. It's a work night, and I'm not really that big on drinking hard alcohol. I do like a beer or a cider or wine and things like that from time to time. And these won't always be alcoholic beverages. It just happens to be tonight because I was kind of in the mood for a cider. But the book I'm going to talk about tonight is Deadhouse Gates by Steven Erikson. This is the second book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series. And I did a short review on my Instagram last month about Gardens of the Moon, which is the first book. And just a short recap of that, I did enjoy Gardens of the Moon a lot. It was chaotic and there were tons of points of view and so many new characters that it was a little bit crazy, and I did struggle with some of those things about it. But overall, that book, I could not put it down. When I wasn't reading it, I was thinking about reading it, and I couldn't wait to get back into the story and get with those characters again. So I really, really enjoyed that one. And I was looking forward to Deadhouse Gates because I have heard from other Malazan fans that this is their all-time favorite. And so I had high expectations for Deadhouse Gates going into it. So what did I think? I mean, did it live up to that hype for me? No. I wish that it did. I'm not saying that I didn't like it. It definitely didn't live up to Gardens of the Moon for me. It had some things about it that I thought were better, but not everything. So I would love to give a synopsis of this book and tell you what this book is about, but I'm not going to. And the reason I'm not going to tell you exactly what this book is about is mostly because I don't really know what it was about. I mean, I would say that this book, more than anything, was about the characters. The characters are there's battles and war and rebellions and gods that are manipulating I want to say humans, but they're not humans because they're all different kinds of beings. But you spend a lot of time in various characters' minds and following their thought processes. Probably way more in this book than I've ever seen in any other story, which was fascinating. I did like the character development in here. I did not like all of the characters that were in this book. In fact, probably my least favorite character in this book got the most point of view time in the first 2/3 of it. So one thing I really did like about this book that was different from Gardens of the Moon is that in Gardens of the Moon, it was a rapid fire of changing points of view and tons of different character points of view, or at least it felt like it to me. and I was lost all the time, and I would be confused when the point of view would change because I didn't always catch the transition and suddenly we were doing something different. And in this book, while you still are bouncing around in multiple points of view, the transitions for them are a lot more delineated. You feel that transition. The transitions happen at moments that seem to make sense. And it was a lot easier for me to follow than the first book in that respect. And I would say that for the most part, this Deadhouse Gates mostly follows 4 points of view. There's multiple characters in each of those scenarios, but for the most part, it is 4 points of view. Occasionally, you get another random one thrown in there, but not nearly as much as I felt like was happening in Gardens of the Moon. So I liked the structure of this book better than Gardens of the Moon for that reason. And there are some characters in it that I really did fall in love with. They just, in my opinion, didn't get as much face time as the ones I didn't like. This is very grimdark. And I love a dystopian story. I love books that have just hard content. I'm not afraid of brutal war scenes or aftermath or anything like that. This book is pretty much all that. And probably where I struggled the most with it is that it was all dark and really no points of light and happiness. No joy was happening, or there were no joyful moments. It really lacked any light whatsoever. And for me, part of what makes a good dark story are the points of light that shine through it, where you can see where people are doing good amongst the darkness. And in the beginning of this, I would say there are a handful of moments that are happy. I don't even know if I'd call them happy, but they were moments where somebody was doing something good for someone else so that you could feel hope in this dark world that Erikson has created. But after the beginning of this, I would say that those moments just were absent for me. I didn't see a lot of hope in this at all. Even the ending just kind of left me feeling sorrowful for probably what's to come in book 3. And I'm hoping that in book 3 that some that things develop into a few more hopeful scenarios, because I'm very invested in this story as a whole, but I'm really going into the next book rather tentative for that reason, because I don't really want to spend the number of hours it takes to read a book like this. I mean, this book is less than 600 pages, but they were 600 pages that probably took me the same amount of time as it would take me to read 700 or 800 pages. It's just they're not that the content's dense and there's a lot of information going on all the time, so it does take probably more brain power than maybe your Fourth Wings, or even your Wheel of Time books don't have as much description and detail and things going on in any one scenario as a Malazan book does. But in addition to that, there is a lot of words on a page. So if you just take into account word count, it's a dense book. So it takes a long time or a longer amount of time to read this book than it would take another book of the same number of pages. And if I'm going to invest that much time, to get back to my original point, if I'm going to invest that kind of time, I don't want to be sad the whole time or angry the whole time. There has to be a little bit of balance, something to lure me back in. Another thing I was missing in this was a whole lot of connection to book one. There are a couple of characters that are familiar, more than a couple, a handful of characters that are familiar from book one, but none of the story really ties back into itself. There is, there are dogs. They're, what do they call them? There are paranormal dogs in book one that you kind of get left off in at the end of that book with some questions about what happens to them, and they show back up in here, or some of them do, with really no tie-in to what happened in book one. And I found that happened with quite a few things. There weren't any tie-ins from events or certain characters that would call you back to something that happened to them in Gardens of the Moon. And I found that part of it kind of frustrating. So it was almost like reading two completely different books. They just happened to be in the same world with a handful of the same characters. Now, I'm expecting that these things will tie in together over a period of time. But really, between the two books, you could not tell that they were supposed to be along the same storyline, or at least I couldn't. So that's how I feel about Deadhouse Gates. I wanted to love this. I really didn't. It intrigues me enough that I'm going to keep going with the series for book 3 at least. I hope I'm going to read them all because I own through book 7 or 8, I think. So, but one thing I did do with this book that I have not done with anything else up to this point was I tabbed it. I did not annotate this book. I don't know how to annotate a book. But what I did was every time something stood out to me that either I thought was particularly funny or meaningful, I tabbed it. So there's just a part in here where I I tabbed something ridiculous. I tabbed an insult, not even an insult. It was an exclamation where one of the characters exclaimed, "Hood stubby ankles." And I just thought that was ridiculous. So it was a silly thing to tab it for. But there are lots of things in this book that just seemed like profound little phrases or paragraphs or even entire sections of the book where, and they're usually when they're in somebody's mind. It happens a lot where you get to see the character's thoughts in italics, basically. And I've never seen as much of it in any other book as I've seen in this one. But sometimes those thoughts that are said or that you get to read about are just really profound thoughts. And so that's what all my tabbing is. I kept all those so that at some point I could go back through this and be and just kind of reread some of those details. One of the other reasons I was tabbing this was it helped me capture important events that were happening in there, because in book one, crazy things would happen, really big events would happen, and the only reason I knew that they'd happened was because on my Fable book club somebody had pointed it out, and I would go, how did I miss that? So in this book, I used the tabs as a way to help me identify when I caught something, because then it seemed like I was catching more of them. because I was physically doing something which made my brain stick with the story. Or something would stand out and I'd be like, I wonder if this is important. And I would tab it so I could see later if it was as important as what it seemed like it might be when I read it. So that was a new experience for me that I haven't done with a book before. And I think it's going to be my go-to way of reading the Malazan series, because it did help me stay focused on the story. And because really some of the stuff that's said in there is dryly hilarious. So anyway, those are my thoughts on Deadhouse Gates. And I know there are a lot of you out there that love Deadhouse Gates, and so I hope that you are not insulted that I did not love your book as much as you did. But I would really love to hear your thoughts on maybe what it is about this particular book that you found so impactful or so good that it is your favorite book of the series. Or if you are like me and you didn't, solidarity is always fun. So by all means, feel free to drop a comment for that. And if you don't feel like, you know, being super chatty, you could do me a favor and leave me a comment anyway, maybe just an emoji. You can maybe, I feel like if you could find one of a dog, find a dog emoji and put it in there would be probably as close of a thing as you're going to get to this, because it's got really cute puppies on the cover. Anyway, thanks for stopping by my channel and for sharing a drink with me, and I will catch you next time.